Good afternoon. Can y'all hear me? Is the mic picking up? We have a brief delay. We have a representative from the fire department on the way. They should be here in a few minutes, but if y'all want to stand at ease, use the restroom or something like that, we'll make an announcement. We're about to start. Just want to let you know what's going on. Thanks for your patience. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. I'm going to check the hallway, see if anybody's out there.
I'm going to bring this meeting of the Design Adjustment Committee to order. My name is Rob Gordon. I'm the chair of the Design Adjustment Committee. The purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's technical standards and specifications manual. The Design Adjustment Committee does not consider housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means they're like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based on the facts presented. All variance requests require a 4/5 vote of the committee to grant a variance. Appeals of the Design Adjustment Committee decisions are to the Board of Adjustment. A written notice of appeal must be filed with the city clerk within 30 days of the Design Adjustment Committee's decision. Appeals are set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment within 30 days or as soon thereafter as practicable. The parties to these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion about the matter, a financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with the affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and the committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and the members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in at the clipboard in the back of the room and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and the standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer oath for individuals who intend to provide witness testimony.
If I could have all staff, applicants, and anyone in the audience who wishes to speak this afternoon to please stand up and be sworn in. In order to speak at the public comment section, you must be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, did you want to, Sean, when did we disclose that the pre-TRC for the board?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Now would be the right time. Mr. Merritt, we talked for a minute before the meeting started. It's my understanding that you sat on pre-TRC potentially for both items that are before the Design Adjustment Committee today. Is that correct? And sitting on pre-TRC, were the waivers discussed in any way that are before this board this afternoon? Let me ask that a different way. Was there any discussion other than waivers would be needed and they would need to come to this board? Okay. Have you had any ex parte or outside of this room conversations with any of the parties in this matter about the requested waivers? Okay.
Lieutenant Merritt, can you please turn on your microphone and answer? Thank you.
Okay. And then I'm just tendering this information to the applicants and any potential parties, just so that everyone's aware. And as we go through this. If anyone has any objection or would like to seek a continuance based on that information, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay, with that, the first item, Brian? Did you?
Yes, sorry. The applicant is requesting a continuance of this item to your next meeting, which will be September 21st.
Okay. I believe we need to take action on that. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion to continue item 1.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So that is continued to the next meeting. Which brings us to item number 2, 2916 Market Street. Staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property before you today has frontage on Market, South 29th and Wayne Drive. The property consists of 8.84 acres and currently contains a 62-room hotel. Just for your information, the applicant is going through the rezoning process to rezone this site from office and institutional in R15 to multi-dwelling high-density, 17 units per acre. That hearing would occur at the September 7th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. The waiver requested today is an increase in the maximum length of a private driveway. As you recall, the technical standards require that a private access driveway shall be at least 500 feet within a public through street. Both Market and Wayne Drive are through streets as recommended. As shown on this site plan, South 29th Street is not a through street, so the applicant is asking for a waiver of approximately 990 feet as identified in the yellow and green on this slide. If the Design Adjustment Committee elects to approve this adjustment, staff recommends the following, which would be an additional vehicular driveway connection shall be required off of Wayne Drive. I'll be happy to answer any questions we have.
Thanks, Jeff. So the applicant is not proposing the driveway off of Wayne Drive currently?
In the current set of plans going through the rezoning process right now, the driveway is not proposed. CRC and staff feel that it complies better with the 500-foot rule to have that connection. Thus, while we recommend that as a condition, I believe the applicant will also go into more detail as to why there is or isn't a driveway.
Certainly. Okay. Any other questions for Jeff?
Jeff, when you, just so I'm clear, when it says another driveway on Wayne Drive, is it one in addition to the blue one shown, or is it the blue one shown?
It's the blue one shown, okay, or somewhere in that area.
So there won't
I'm
be
not
two,
sure,
yeah.
I'm not sure if that driveway is going to stay in that location, depending on, this is very, very vaguely affected by the Independence Road extension. So we think that that'll be the final placement of the driveway, but it may move as well. Okay. The point was to say that, not to say that all driveway traffic would be off of Wayne Drive. We just said an additional shall be placed on Wayne in addition to the Market Street and South 29th connection.
And I'm assuming that the driveways proposed, meaning the one on Market, the one on 29th, and then the potential one on Wayne Drive, otherwise meet all the other technical standards, property line offset, intersection offset.
Yes, sir, they do. The applicant is actually closing two driveways on Market Street and centering the driveway on the property itself. So there are no additional waivers from the text standards when it comes to this placement of the driveways as currently designed.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is slightly out of order, but I'd request that the DAC allow Mr. Shipman to come up. I met with him before the meeting today, and he represents various property owners in the area and is going to be making a petition that this body recognize standing for him and his clients in this matter. But I'd like to do that at this point so that if standing is recognized, that he would have the right to cross-examine and ask questions as this hearing proceeds.
What is the procedure to acknowledge or deny standing? I mean, do we have to make a motion and approve, or do we just allow? I don't.
You know, it's a great question. I'd probably have you vote on it. It'd be majority would rule. You know, that'd be my interpretation on it. If you have legal questions about it as we go through the process, I'm happy to answer those. I will point out that our land development code does include a presumption that if an individual owns property that abuts a site, that there is a presumption of standing. And I'm not sure what information Mr. Shipman may introduce in regard to that, but that's something that our code does recognize. It's a presumption. You're not required to find it, but that presumption is there.
Okay. And would this occur before or after the applicant presents?
I'm going to ask that we go ahead and do the standing portion of it now, and then we'll have the applicant have their presentation afterwards.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Shipman?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Gary Shipman. I represent Gene Kapolchuk, whose property is shown in red, James R. Benson, whose property is shown in red, Kitty Yerkes, whose property is shown in red, Thomas Varnum, whose property is shown in red, and Louise Cruz and Polly Tate, whose property is also shown in red. Everyone except Ms. Kapolchuk is present. She is participating from her business address in California and watching this live and online. To the extent that it matters, as I read the Land Development Code, given this presumption, it would only be if anyone challenged the standing of any of these individuals that I believe you'd be required to vote on it, but obviously you can. But I believe that certainly any and all of these people that are shown in red here satisfy the presumption of standing based upon where their property is in relationship to this proposed project. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chambers or Mr. Walton, would the city like to address standing in any way? You don't have to.
No, we're good.
Ms. Schaefer, would you like to be heard prior to the commission taking up the issue of standing? Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Just as a formality, I mean, I guess we'll go ahead and vote on it. I don't think anybody's going to deny Mr. Shipman, but I'll make the motion that we approve standing.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shipman, your clients are recognized as having standing in this matter. Thank you.
Sure. So now the applicant's turn to speak? Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Amy Schaefer with Lee Case. I'm an attorney. I am not going to speak to the details of this project because that's not what it's for. I'm just here because it's a quasi-judicial hearing, trying to help guide and make sure that all the findings of fact are met and that the evidence gets presented and taken into the record. So on that stance, we would ask that Mr. Walton's presentation be entered into the record. And I would like to introduce Paramount Engineering, and I'll just ask them briefly to present their names, their credentials, and then they can get started with the project and the request.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Ingebretson. I am a registered landscape architect and land planner with Paramount Engineering, and this is Rob Allen.
Hi, good afternoon. Rob Allen, professional engineer with Paramount Engineering at 122 Cinema Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina.
And we would just ask that they be entered as experts for the record. Mr. Shipman and the city, we're happy to go through their whole CV if you want, but I don't think we have any objections. So I'm going to ask Ms. Engelbretson to start her presentation then. Thank you.
I am going to ask Mr. Ballin to stand up with me just in case we have questions about civil engineering matters or anything that he is a better expert at than I am. So good afternoon. Thank you very much for hearing our item. Do I have a way to advance the slides or do I need to? Okay. All right. All right, so our site, as Mr. Walton has pointed out, is along Market Street in Wayne. In his orientation, north was straight up, and our orientation north is to the left of what you're seeing along Market Street. So the subject site is in red there, and we have the surrounding streets highlighted here if there are questions as we go through the additional pieces of the presentation. So as you know, we are here to discuss the technical standard of what is affectionately called the 500-800 rule, so the extension of a private driveway through the site. And the existing site accesses are pointed to on this aerial. We have one, let's see if I can do this without blinding anywhere. One right here close to the, close to the intersection of Wayne and Market. That is a site access that we propose to close. One access is here at Market Street. And a small correction to what Mr. Walton said, we actually do plan to utilize that access but improve it to city standards. And then the other access that exists is right here at Wayne Drive. Now, there is a 29th Street has a turnaround, a bulb at the end of it, but it does not actually access our site. The proposal originally looked at making a connection to that 29th Street to improving the Wayne Drive access and to the one Market Street access we just discussed. This was the plan that we presented at our first of two community meetings. We met with a great amount of scrutiny on access at Wayne Drive and at 29th Street, as well as other items, but things pertaining specifically to what we're here to talk about. Those access points were requested not to be there at very least. In our second community meeting, we came back with a gated access at 29th Street with the existing connection still at Wayne Drive and the Market Street connection. We then prepared, after that community meeting, we again met with scrutiny for those connections to the adjacent roadways. We consulted with our traffic consultant, who is also here this afternoon should there be questions on those matters. And in doing so, we've put together some information about how site circulation can work through the site and how it most efficiently works through the site. We took our plan to pre-TRC without connection to Wayne Drive and with the gated emergency access connection to 29th Street. At that meeting, staff strongly recommended that we make the connection to Wayne Drive at very least, and there was much discussion about making a full-service access to 29th Street. Their recommendations coincided with our traffic consultant's recommendations about proper site access through the site. So in presentation to you today, we have not revised our pre-TRC plans for submittal to Planning Board yet, but intend to include that Wayne Drive connection and are presenting this plan here as if that connection was to be made. We are also proposing that the South 29th Street is a full service connection to that loop at the end of 29th. I'll further explain that. That may not be incredibly pertinent to our technical standard review today, but I do have some information that I think will factor into your ultimate decision. So the items that you see here are coded in red and blue. The red is anything that is within 500 feet of the Market Street access. The blue is anything that is within 500 feet of the Wayne Drive proposed access. And let me be clear about that. There is an existing access at Wayne Drive, as Mr. Walton mentioned. We are proposing to improve that to the new city standard driveway. It is a one-lane driveway right now. We would extend that to a full service, 24-foot wide driveway. However, as Mr. Walton alluded to, there is at this intersection here, there are some DOT improvements. It seems to be in early days, and we're not sure exactly how those improvements could affect that driveway, but we'll be in constant contact with DOT through that process and shift the driveway. We know that it will not be any closer to the intersection of Market Street and Wayne than it is shown here. There is a possibility that we could come and align it with that parking area there in the blue. So moving forward from that, as you well know, the 500-800 rule allows a certain amount of distance from a public right-of-way through the site through a private driveway. What we have here are proposed as private driveways and not including a public street to be brought through the project. However, what we do have is an extra connection that doesn't really fall into what we've talked about. So the area in green here, that's why it's in a different color. It connects to South 29th Street. It is not a through street. 29th Street is not a through street, so it can't be considered in our technical review findings today. But I do want to point out that we recognize the intent of the rule, or one of the intents of the rule, is to promote good site connectivity, not have dead-end roads, have people able to get through project sites. And as such, that South 29th Street connection furthers what I think the intent of the rule is, even though it doesn't, by the letter of the law, meet the standard. So the area that you see in the yellow beige color is the area that is not captured. It's one of the main reasons we're here to ask for a variance today. That area is, depending on where you connect your dots, between 400 and 500 feet long. The total variance request, however, has to continue all the way to at least to the last driveway, but in our instance, what is in our variance request actually goes all the way to that 29th Street connection. So that is the 990 feet that's in your report. So as part of our analysis of this site, we look at the findings of fact. the things that I know you'll have to assess our project on. One of those things is it compliant with the intent of what we're here to ask the variance from? So I believe that if we're talking about connectivity, creating better access through the site, I think the answer to that is yes. We are trying to make sure that there's good access around proposed buildings through the site and making sure we don't have unnecessary congestion within our project. Another finding of fact talks about compliance with the comprehensive plan. And one of the things in the comprehensive plan that we've highlighted in our rezoning application, but it didn't make its way to you because this is not a rezoning matter, is the policy 1.3.3 in the comprehensive plan. In short summary of that, it talks about development should provide pedestrian and vehicular circulation and connections between and within developments. It should provide alternative means to keep people off of major corridors. And with our project, one of the things that we're doing, and in a lot of coordination back and forth between other pieces of the comprehensive plan, we're bringing sidewalks along our roadway that is going through the project site. So we'll make connection to 29th Street, we'll make connection to Wayne Drive, as well as this little piece right here, right there, is a connection through to what is an open space here. Thank you. So the surrounding land use is completely built out, with the exception of this piece here, which is a city open space. It's a city-owned piece of property. It's a bit of an extension of Beaumont Park, which is on Wayne Drive right here. And during our initial planning with the city staff, there was some talk of putting a pedestrian connection through this project site connecting South 29th over to that park. And part of what we're here to do is put this project road in, and if you choose to allow us the extension through this variance, we'll carry that sidewalk along part of this road and make that connection. There are several other things that we could talk about with compliance with the comprehensive plan and other city plans, but I think trying to keep it to the pertinent 500-800 rule, that's one of the ones that is most appropriate. There's another finding of fact that we need to present to you. It's that the project variance would not create additional congestion. As I mentioned previously, we feel like this is providing good circulation through the site and alternative drives that are not currently accessible or not as accessible as they are in today's climate on the site. So we believe we meet that one. The last finding of fact for the DAC is whether or not this creates lots without street frontage. This has plenty of street frontage, so I think you'll find that this variance request is not anything that would challenge that lot frontage. So just in closing on my piece of the presentation, I'd like to say that we are here today to request this variance because this is an infill project. It's one that's a little challenging in that it has existing site access, but it is only site access for the developed piece that is up at Market Street. The surrounding properties are built without ability to make a connection that would warrant a compliance with the 500-800 rule. The only thing that we could do is bring a public road in through that city open space when we talked briefly with the city about that, there was not interest in bringing a road through the open space. It's intended as park space. So, and furthermore, it would be a public road just to access this one project, and it didn't really seem like a good use of funding. So in this request, we are asking for our project in particular, but we also feel that this property is special in the fact that it is landlocked. It does not matter if we were to ask you or somebody else proposing development on this site. It just is not possible to meet that 500, 800 rule in totality. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob and Amy for additional comment.
Mr. Evans, would it be appropriate for me to ask her questions at this point, or should I wait?
Let me ask the board what their preference is. I'm fine either way. Would you like Mr. Shipman to reserve his cross-examination for this witness until after the entire presentation?
Yeah, I think I'd like to hear the rest
Okay.
of the presentation, and we can do that.
Is that acceptable, Mr. Shipman? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Rob Ballin, once again. I don't really have anything to add. Allison touched on all the points that we recognize are important here, so really I'll be here to answer any technical questions should you have any at this point. Thank you.
I don't have anything further at this time, just whenever it's appropriate, you know, I'm happy to wrap up and touch on how we met the requirements and the necessary findings of fact.
I have one question. Are we now appropriate? Okay, I just have one clarification that there's been a lot of talk of TRC submittals and initial submittals. What's being presented to us today is a full access driveway off of 29th, a full access off of Wayne, and full access off of Market. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct, and that is what we intend to resubmit for addressing pre-TRC comments, and it will go to the planning board as such.
Thank you.
Ma'am, let me address my initial questions to you. You're not a traffic engineer, are you, ma'am?
I am not, but we have one here with us.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Shipman, let me stop you right there. Would you mind, I'm going to give you my chair, that way you can speak into the mic and we can have everything on record. I apologize for not having enough microphones.
So the answer to that is no, sir, I am not, but I am happy to have our witness come up and answer your questions.
You have never performed a traffic impact study yourself, have you, ma'am?
I have not.
You've never performed a corridor study, have you?
I have not performed a corridor study as far as an engineered corridor study. I have done plenty of comprehensive planning.
You've never done a parking study, have you, ma'am?
I have done parking analysis in conjunction with traffic engineers, but I have not done anything that I could seal, no.
You've never done an intersection improvement study, have you, ma'am?
I have not.
You have never done a Vision Zero study, have you, ma'am?
I have not.
You've never done a traffic management plan study, have you, ma'am?
I have not, other than doing site planning that then gets used in those studies.
You've never done a maintenance of traffic alternatives analysis study, have you, ma'am?
I have not.
Are you familiar with the manual on uniform traffic control devices?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever performed any studies in association with the manual on uniform traffic control devices?
I have certainly designed in accordance with it. Studies, no.
Yes, ma'am. You've never rendered any opinions about compliance with the manual on traffic control devices, have you, ma'am?
I have certainly been asked my opinion, but I have no authority other than just planning. That has to come from an engineer, yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the published standards from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever rendered any opinions about compliance with those standards?
No.
Similarly, you're familiar with the NCDOT roadway standards?
Yes.
Have you ever rendered any opinions about compliance with NCDOT roadway standards?
Not other than site planning that gets used in conjunction with every development.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask this gentleman those same questions, if I might. Sir, I want to follow the same kind of sequence of questions that I just asked. You are not a traffic engineer, are you, sir?
I am not a specific traffic engineer, no.
You have never worked in a supervisory or managerial role on traffic studies, have you, sir?
I have not.
Have you ever performed any traffic impact studies?
I've worked on them with others who eventually sealed them, but I did not seal them.
Okay. You wouldn't be qualified to seal a traffic impact study, would you, sir?
I'm a professional engineer, but it's not my area of expertise, so I'm going to say no to that.
All right, sir. Have you ever done a car door study?
Supplement it once again with other engineers, but not my name on it.
You ever done a parking study
Yes, I have done a parking study.
in conjunction with a traffic engineer?
No, that was solely on my own, and it was, for projects within the city that we either show we cannot meet parking or exceed parking, so.
You ever done an intersection improvement study?
I have conducted, excuse me, I have completed plans of the improvement, not a study of the
You've never
intersection.
sealed any such plans for a study, for intersection improvements, have you, sir?
Not for the study, but for the improvements.
Yes, sir. Have you ever done a Vision Zero study?
No, sir.
Have you ever done a transportation management plan study?
No, sir.
Are you familiar with the manual on uniform traffic control devices?
Yes, I am.
Have you ever undertaken to certify any plans as being compliant with the manual on uniform traffic control devices?
I have signed plans that have MUTCD requirements on them, yes.
And you've certified compliance with those?
Yes, I have.
How about the standard from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials? Have you ever signed off and certified plans as being compliant with those standards?
Yes, I have.
How about the NCDOT roadway standards?
Yes, I have.
Now, have you performed a traffic study in connection with this project?
I personally have not.
Okay. Have you seen one?
I have seen a study that was conducted by our traffic engineer, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That's all.
Ms. Schaefer, do you have any rebuttal questions?
I have no rebuttal questions. They're not traffic engineers. We do have one of those here. Ms. Cheese, if you'd come up, please. The 500, 800-foot rule waiver is typically done by our civil engineers. We do have Caroline Cheeves here with Ramey Kemp, and if I could just ask her a few questions. Could you state your name and your credentials, please?
My name is Caroline Cheeves. I am a licensed civil engineer in the state of North Carolina. I currently work at Ramey Kemp Associates. I have almost 7 years of experience. I have done probably over 100 traffic impact analyses. I primarily work with private developers on their traffic impact analyses. That is my area of expertise.
Have you performed these services for other projects within the city of Wilmington?
Yes.
And have you worked with the new land development code?
Yes, I have worked with project teams working with the land development code.
And have you reviewed this project plan in conjunction with Paramount Engineering?
Yes.
I have no further questions for Ms. Cheeves. I don't know if Mr. Shipman does.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. That's all for us, but like I said at the end, I'd like to be able to just do a brief closing statement to touch on and withhold any rebuttal if Mr. Shipman presents evidence. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, typically that'd be the end of our presentation, but Mr. Shipman and his clients have been recognized as parties. They have a right to make a presentation as well, so I'd ask that you invite them to do so.
Absolutely. Mr. Shipman?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, again, my name is Gary Shipman. I represent the individuals whose property is shown here in red. With me is a 36-year traffic engineer that you'll hear from in just a second. This, we believe, request must be denied because it does not meet the intent of the Land Development Code. If we were at a civil proceeding in a judicial proceeding, I would make a motion to dismiss their request because they have not put on a prima facie case of entitlement to the variance that they seek, as you will see. The design adjustment sought here is only being sought to facilitate the development of this property to its maximum permitted density under the new Land Development Code that is less than a year old. Under the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, this property is designated as, quote, suburban commercial retrofit opportunity area. The O&I portion along Market Street is identified as a commercial district mixed use. The rear of the property, of course, is presently zoned R15. The dark pink, this is from the comprehensive plan opportunity designation. The area in dark pink is the area where this property is located. It is clear that at the time that the Land Development Code was enacted in 2021, it is clear that nobody contemplated that this area would undergo the kind of radical change that is being proposed by this applicant. The proposed design adjustment does not meet the intent of the Land Development Code because this variance is sought in connection with a rezoning that will place, according to the applicant, a 4-story, 112-unit apartment building, 52 feet in height, 36 two-story townhouses, 279 parking spaces, sandwiched between single-story residential development and the city of Wilmington parkland and green space. It will eliminate 5.3 acres of urban forest and natural resource interconnectivity through the removal of approximately 245 trees and the existing understory. It'll double the driveway length. It cannot, therefore, achieve consistency with the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan, and this shows you why. On the left is the Comprehensive Plan. Areas of opportunity designation, suburban commercial, retrofit, mid-range on the scale. They're proposing the highest density permitted. Next, development should create places, streets, and spaces that are visually attractive, safe, accessible, functional, inclusive, have their own distinct identities, and maintain or improve desired character. No way that the applicant has shown that the project does this, and this variance is part of the proposed rezoning. You can't separate the two. Next, the comprehensive plan. Quality design and site planning should be promoted so that new development, infill, and redevelopment is implemented with minimal adverse impacts on desired character of the existing built environment. This project doesn't achieve any consistency with that because of the level of intensity that this project contemplates, which is the reason that the variance is being requested. Comprehensive plan, low to medium density residential area and or low intensity mixed use development should serve as transitions. That's not what they proposed here. They proposed the maximum density. Commercial districts, O&I, the front part. Development should be designed at a height, mass, scale, and form that is appropriate and provides a suitable transition to the surrounding area. No question. This project is out of scale. The 900-foot driveway is out of scale, dumping onto 29th Street. The enhanced access onto Wayne Drive. Next, need to increase housing supply, neighborhood commerce, and to mature as a city should be balanced with the need to protect desired neighborhood character, preserve historic resources, protect the natural environment. There's no consistency with that part of the comprehensive plan with what is being proposed here. Not at all, nor has the applicant even attempted to present any evidence about that. Infill development. This project has been referred to at times as an infill project. Should enhance or improve the existing development pattern. Not consistent at all. Infill sites within existing neighborhoods should be developed consistently with the design elements of nearby structures and in a manner that enhances or improves the character of the area. Doesn't do that. Environmentally sensitive natural areas should be identified, mapped, protected, enhanced, and maintained. First, we don't even have any, again, evidence about that and consistency with that, but what we do know from the plan that has been presented is that we're going to eliminate this forest that interconnects with other city park resources. New development should reflect the context which it is constructed both in terms of architectural style and urban form. Again, no consistency with the comprehensive plan here. Look at section 18-4 of the Land Development Code. That tells us what the purpose was behind the adoption of this new Land Development Code, and state that they represent a reasonable consideration of the character of the city's various neighborhoods and the suitability for particular uses of land. There's been no showing of a suitability. Do they have to do it now? Yes, because part of the criteria that they've got to establish in this quasi-judicial hearing is consistency with the Land Development Plan Code and the comprehensive plan. I want to introduce you to Lawrence Green. Mr. Green is a traffic engineer with 36 years worth of experience. We have provided to the clerk to provide to you copies of an affidavit, and we're going to do it simply this way. The applicant has been given a copy of his application. Mr. Green, introduce yourself, if you will, to members of the committee.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Green. I'm a professional engineer in the state of North Carolina, as well as a professional traffic operations engineer with 36 years experience.
You have prepared an affidavit and a memorandum with your impressions, and you have attached a copy of your curriculum vitae to that affidavit. Is that right, sir?
That's correct.
Is everything contained in this affidavit true of the best of your knowledge and belief and professional opinion?
That is correct.
And the conclusions in your memorandum similarly, are those the product of your professional opinion and your 36-plus years of experience as a traffic engineer?
Yes, yes.
I would tender Mr. Green as an expert traffic engineer. And you certainly will, obviously, take as much time as you wish to read his conclusions. I'm simply going to summarize them, and I'm going to tender him to you to ask any questions that you've got. First, let's look at what it is that Section 1603 that deals with the standards for the grant of a variance. Intent of design adjustments is to, quote, provide relief where application of a standard creates practical difficulties in allowing development that otherwise advances the purposes served by this chapter. Mr. Green has rendered an opinion. This proposed project and the variance associated with it does not further advance the purposes expressed in the LDC. He has an opinion that this project will double the site-generated trips during AM and PM peak hours. It will increase traffic from the site by more than 2.5 times. It will increase, not decrease, congestion, exacerbate heavy traffic on Market Street and traffic on Market Street and Wayne Drive and 29th Street, one of the things that the applicant was required to have already shown to you. That's why I say if we were in court, I'd be asking a judge to dismiss their request, because that's one of the things that they were required to show to you. They rested their evidence. Next, they're required to show that the project's consistent with the comprehensive plan, whose purpose is to promote efficient traffic circulation. Again, you've had two people who are not traffic engineers attempt to render an opinion, I guess, about efficient traffic circulation when neither one of them are qualified and competent to render that opinion. And he is. And he's rendering an opinion that no, this variance does not promote efficient traffic circulation. It does not minimize the risk of fire, panic, and other damage. It does not protect public health, safety, and general welfare, or protect residential neighborhoods. Therefore, the standards for approval have not been met in this quasi-judicial hearing where you must base your decision on the basis of what they've already presented. Because it doesn't meet the intent of the LDC, it doesn't conform with the comprehensive plan, it increases congestion, compromises safety. As Mr. Green says, this variance is only being sought so that the applicant can develop the property in the most intense fashion permitted under the LDC. You have certain presumptions of reasonableness when it comes to a request for a variance of this type, and none of them apply. There are no topographic constraints, or you hadn't heard about any. There are no existing buildings, streams, or other natural features. The issue with the site layout of adjacent adjoining properties, there's no issue there. Showing that strict compliance would pose a safety hazard, no showing there. Conflict with an approved or built roadway construction project, no showing there. Those are the presumptions that are contained in the code of this request being reasonable. They've made no attempt to show that because they don't exist. So the burden's on the applicant under 8-570B, given that this is an evidentiary hearing, not a legislative hearing, to produce competent material, substantial evidence, tending to establish the existence of the facts and conditions which the ordinance requires. And only if they make out that prima facie case are we required to come forward with competent material and substantial evidence to rebut it. They haven't done that, but we have. We've come forward with competent material and substantial evidence on our own that this variance does not meet the request. Therefore, we believe, as a matter of law, the request has to be denied because this is a quasi-judicial hearing. Burden's on them, not on us, to show otherwise. Now, the suggestion is made that, well, isn't this better, this long driveway? Well, my response is better than what? What is it better than? Oh, the back part of the property is landlocked. It's designated R15. It's not zoned MD17 as they seek to have it rezoned. So this is not a request that you are fielding for this applicant who's seeking to develop its R15 property. You're not fielding that application. You're fielding an application for them to develop this property at its maximum density and construct a driveway at double the length. Fire. Has the applicant attempted to address the fire issues, the safety issues, the access issues? No. Hadn't attempted to do that. Oh, well, that, Mr. Shipman, that'll be done at TRC. The way we read the ordinance, it's got to be done today as part of this process, as part of the quasi-judicial part of this process. It's got to be done today, not kicked down the road to TRC. This was the day for them to present the evidence of compliance with the LDC and the comprehensive plan. They haven't done that. I'm happy to have Mr. Green answer any questions that anybody may have, or certainly I'll be happy to answer any questions that any member of the committee may have.
Any comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Schaefer, did you have any questions for cross-examination?
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Mr. Green, you want to sit over here so you can have a microphone? I think I have it turned on. Is the green light on?
Yes.
Hi. Have you handled any projects or been an engineer on any projects in the city of Wilmington?
Yeah, well, New Hanover County I have. It's what wasn't in the city.
Okay, thank you. And your letter, it talks about traffic capacity, it talks about the comprehensive plan and the rezoning, but the waiver from the 500, 800-foot rule. Could you explain what your concern is with the waiver from the 500, 800-foot rule that we're here for today?
So in my opinion, that the project could potentially be developed without a waiver if you got access through the public space to Wayne Avenue.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Is there any discussion amongst the board at this time? We got to open the public hearing, I think, at some point.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
I just wasn't sure, is it appropriate now, Mr. Evans, for me to do my brief closing, or how did you want to do that?
Mr. Chair, I'll leave that up to you. You can go proceed with the public comment and then allow Ms. Schaefer and Mr. Shipman to make a closing statement afterwards or address any statements that may come up during that public comment hearing.
Yeah, I'd like to hear the public comment first,
Thank
and then
you.
we can close later.
Is that acceptable, Ms. Schaefer? Mr. Shipman? Okay.
Okay. At this point, we will open the public hearing. Amy, who is?
Mr. Chairman, I would simply tender the individuals who I have identified who are here. Their positions were made known through me.
Mr. Shipman, you need to come to the microphone. I'm sorry. This is recorded, and therefore it isn't picked up if it's not on a microphone.
The individuals who I identified that are here and present, I would tender them to answer any questions that anybody may have, including the applicant. Their positions have been made, I think, clear, or tried to be, through the presentation that I've made. So I would not
Understood.
have them come up and be simply redundant of what's already
Nope,
been said.
I appreciate that. And I guess that's a comment I would make for anyone who does wish to speak is, we are considering one variance on the 500, 800-foot rule. We don't really consider the use typically here or the number of bedrooms as I read in that introduction. So, please try and keep your points brief and avoid redundancy wherever possible. We certainly want to make sure everybody's heard, but we also want to be respectful of everyone's time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Okay.
Sir, were you sworn in?
I was not.
Okay. If there's anyone else in the public who thinks that they want to speak and they did not stand up and were sworn in, please do so at this time. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Chip Overman. I'm a licensed general contractor in the state of North Carolina, and I'm currently constructing a home for myself and my wife on 29th Street. We're in the last lot of the cul-de-sac. We would be directly across from the proposed driveway. I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm not a professional engineer, but during the course of building this home, I've been on that street every day, almost every day, for the last 6 months, give or take. So I've had opportunity to observe the traffic. Anyone considering this should spend some time on 29th Street. Not only is it not a through street, it is a substandard street in terms of the City of Wilmington's requirements for width and access, if you will. It is essentially a one-way street. 2 cars may pass it if all conditions are correct. Getting by a large truck would be problematic. There's no on-street parking because that would create obstacles to access. It just cannot handle the traffic that this is going to generate. It would be, in my opinion, unsafe in terms of fire department access, among other things. My project is also an infill project, and I've done it without asking for a variance. 29th Street is so narrow and so constricted that we could not get electrical power to my house down 29th Street. We could not get natural gas service to my property. We had to seek alternate means to access the property off of another street. So I think in terms of asking for this variance to connect that long driveway servicing multiple buildings to a small residential substandard street would be an incorrect move to make. Thank you.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be quite brief. I've been involved in zoning issues on both sides of zoning. Many of us here are not opposed to development per se.
Sir, could you please state your name
I
for the record?
apologize. Yes, my full name is Robert M. McCord. I own a partner and I own the house at 23 South 29th Street. We bought it just a few months before this. We're working very hard to run a good Airbnb with full parking, cooperating with our neighbors, et cetera. I've been involved in development on both sides, both as a neighbor and as a developer previously. The main question that presents itself here is, why do we need a zoning variance? Why not invite in people who will work within the existing zoning constraints, which among other things would provide for small commercial development, which would make the neighborhood better. And certainly the scale of this, I mean, just please, if you're even remotely thinking about approving this, spend some time on 29th Street trying to cut into Market Street, see what the existing traffic problems are, and imagine something that's many times the size of the condo building that's already at Market and 29th Street. And you can just see that that the capacity for the neighborhood would be overwhelmed by this number of units, by the lack of parking, by the very probable intention of parking on the neighboring neighborhood streets. It's just an overwhelming proposal. So we respectfully ask that we stick with the zoning at hand and work politely with developers who would develop within the current zoning constraint. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? No one else? Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing portion of the meeting. And I guess, is there any discussion amongst the board? I mean, I have a question for staff, actually. I don't know whether it's that Jeff or Brian, but can you give me an update on where they stand with any kind of proposed rezoning for this property?
Sure. So in the analysis section, item number 7,
states that the applicant is proposing to rezone this portion from office and institutional in R15 to MD17, which is the multi-dwelling residential for conditional district. That is, depending on what happens at this meeting, but it should move forward to the September 7th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, and then if Planning Commission recommends approval, then it would go to the October City Council meeting, which I'm not sure about what that date is. I think it's the 4th. I think it's the 4th. I'm not entirely sure.
Is it staff's, I guess, policy to, I guess not advance a project through rezoning until it's been heard by the DAC? Is that the typical process? Do they go to the DAC first and then advance?
It's kind of like the process for new code. The previous code, we would have taken it to the Planning Commission first, then SRB/DAC, and then to City Council. But with new code, the opinion is to take it through these evidentiary hearings first, such as the design adjustment, or if it was a tree issue, take it to the Board of Adjustment before proceeding through the entitlement process.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may add, the reason we want to do that is we want our elected and appointed decision makers to see the plan that can be built. We would not like to take a plan and put it in front of them that may change based on the outcome of a proceeding that would happen here. Otherwise, it would have to go back through the entire process.
Understood. Any discussion amongst the board? Okay.
I'll speak to how the proposed development aligns with the comprehensive plan in the LDC. I appreciate some of the opinions we heard from Mr. Shipman's presentation there. I disagree wholeheartedly with some of their assertions. The intent of the LDC, the areas of opportunity, largely are to balance that development in between the corridors and between residential uses often found off the corridors. I can understand the reason it's created that way is so we don't end up with larger buildings like this in areas where maybe they don't make the most sense. On one of our primary corridors is where they make the most sense. And the LDC and the comprehensive plan, all led by the community, have engaged it to be that way. And so from that perspective, from an urban design perspective, from a long-range planning perspective, this aligns with the city's vision for development. Just throw that out there.
Thank you. I have a question for the applicant. It's going to be more of a technical question, but I don't know the process of. Do we know the width of 29th Street right now? I mean, can it accommodate two-way traffic? I mean, has that been reviewed and looked at?
It is currently a City of Wilmington street. It, as far as I know, operates as a City of Wilmington street, and I have not further assessed it beyond that standpoint, but I have been on it, and two cars can pass. It is a tight street.
It's a narrower right-of-way. Yeah.
Yes.
What about the circulation around the cul-de-sac at the end? I mean, it's kind of a unique, I've been out there, but it's been a long time. But in preparation for this, it does look like it's a sort of a unique shape. What about circulation for emergency vehicles? Is that
certainly
is that limited in any way by the shape of that island, or do you feel like they can still circulate if you run auto turns? Is there any?
I have run some auto turn assessments just based on the data that we have in the office. It is in no way a full assessment, but it is use of software that we use on a regular basis to assess such matters. And vehicles, emergency vehicles, trash trucks, the like, are able to make that turn. Now, I'm not going to say that it's not tight. It is tight. But they are able to make that turn, and if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say that it is designed in such a way that it was meant to allow those vehicles to make that turn. Now, in our pre-TRC communications, we talked a lot about taking vehicles from this proposed site onto 29th Street, and we recognize that we need to do some detailed analysis of exactly how that alignment needs to hit that 29th Street to make sure that the fire emergency vehicles and the like.
That's where I was headed, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
is it accessible from your site through
Yes.
that cul-de-sac and out 29th Street?
Initial looks at it are yes. We just need to do some detailed design.
Okay. My last question that I had was, and this shows my ignorance when it comes to TIAs, but is there any, does the TIA speak to the distribution of traffic out that rear entrance? I mean, obviously the density seems to be centered in the front, and I would assume the majority of the vehicles, you know, that in the apartment building there would access via Market and potentially Wayne. I'm trying to get a sense of, you know, if we do have a substandard road on 29th Street, what kind of benefit does someone have other than an alternate means of access? What kind of benefit does someone have to use that on a regular basis? If there is a, you know, a neighborhood back there or a resident back there, as Mr. Oberman, you know, mentioned, you know, what kind of distribution would they be looking at?
Certainly, and I am going to defer that answer to Ms. Cheeves. I will state that it is not a TIA that we have. We do have a traffic assessment because
Okay.
this particular project did not have enough traffic to warrant a full TIA. So we did not trigger the city standards for that full TIA, but the developer has gone through a traffic assessment to further understand. So I will defer to her.
Thank you, Allison. And yes, she is correct. We, in coordination with the WMPO, this project did not require a TIA, but based on feedback from the neighbors, the development team wanted us to prepare a traffic assessment, which is looking at the same exact things that a TIA looks at, intersection analysis, traffic counts, and obviously distributing the site traffic to the roadway network. Based on this site plan and based on the fact that the majority of the traffic generated from this development will be from the multifamily, which will have the most direct access to our site access directly on Market Street, it does not make a whole lot of sense looking at the site plan and the flow of traffic that a large portion of the traffic would use South 29th Street, as they would have to backtrack through the site, go through that roundabout, or go through that cul-de-sac. And as stated, you know, based on people's observations, South 29th Street, you know, it will not be the brand-new road that this development is installing, so it is not as nice to drive on. And the new driveway will be up to NCDOT standards. So when we looked at this analysis, and typically when we have these connections, it is likely that there is some traffic from South 29th Street that would prefer to go through our site, as well as some traffic from our development would go through theirs. We did look at the analysis with and without that South 29th Street connection. And when we looked at it with the connection, we assumed 10% of the development traffic would be utilizing South 29th Street, just to sort of try and determine. I typically would state that it is sort of a wash, you know, in terms of traffic. Some uses our access, some uses their access, and I typically would not distribute that much traffic to that indirect access of South 29th Street, but we did distribute some traffic just to see what our impacts would be at the intersection of Market Street and South 29th Street. And we did find that this development, that intersection, although I understand there are concerns with having to wait at an unsignalized intersection, we did find that that intersection does operate in accordance to NCDOT acceptable levels of service, and our development would not increase that or degrade the level of service to unacceptable.
Thank you. That's all I had. Did you have? One second, let me finish, seeing if we have any other questions for her first. We good? Okay, thank you. Did you want to?
I just wanted to pose a couple questions to her in light of what she just presented, if I can.
Mr. Shootman does have the opportunity to rebut. I'd ask that you allow him to ask those few
sure,
questions.
Yeah, I was just trying to let her finish and let us finish before we.
Do you want to sit over here?
I can, yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Ma'am, have you looked at the analysis performed by Mr. Green?
Yes, I have.
Do you disagree with his conclusions?
I agree with his trip generation and his assessment of the ADT. However, I did not see in the assessment where he used analysis to actually study the level of service and the capacity of the individual intersections. So I came up with a different conclusion than Mr. Green in regards to the appropriateness in the traffic flow of this development.
But you agree with his conclusion that versus the existing use, the proposed use will double the site-generated trips during both the AM and PM peak hours?
Correct, that is correct. However, it will still be under the TIA threshold for the city of Wilmington. And the reason why there are thresholds for developments to perform TIAs is because typically that is where a significant impact is reached. So this is below that TIA threshold for the city of Wilmington. The city of Wilmington did not want a TIA analysis because it's below their typical threshold to have a significant impact on the roadway network.
And you agree with his conclusions that daily traffic from the site will increase by more than 2.5 times?
Correct, but still below that threshold.
Yes, ma'am. And you would agree with me that the 20% assumption that you've made of traffic from the site may access 29th Street, you would agree with me there's no standard that you can tell the committee that you've applied with that assumption, right?
I use engineering judgment and I take a look at existing traffic patterns in the site plan. Obviously with TIAs, we do have to make assumptions with these items. We cannot predict in the future that all of these residents will use the exact the exact access that we state. And so that's why I clarified that it is likely there will be some traffic to and from each access.
Thank you, ma'am.
If I may just briefly.
Sure.
Ms. Chiefs, and what you're talking about is the proposed rezoning, which is not in front of this board today. Is that correct?
Correct.
And looking at the existing traffic and the net traffic, can you explain if you've looked at that and what you were able to find in your examination?
Yes, so the existing traffic, the existing uses generates approximately 264 daily trips and 25 total weekday AM trips and 18 total weekday PM trips. With the proposed development, our total trips would be 712, with the AM being 51 and the PM being 62. The City of Wilmington's thresholds is 100 peak hour trips, so we are well below that threshold. In the AM, we're about half of that, and in the PM, we are 62, so about 60%.
Does any of this change your analysis on the requested private driveway length waiver?
No.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Any further discussion from the board? I guess I have a question for you. Have you seen any concerns?
Rob, I'm sorry. For some reason, your microphone is not picking you up.
Huh.
Well, so if you could talk into it a little bit closer. I know it's awkward. Thank you.
Sorry. There it goes, I can hear it now. Do you see any issues with the circulation or access point off of 29th Street from fire access? I mean, is there any modifications that need to be made to that cul-de-sac? Would that be a beneficial point of entry or alternate point of entry?
Well, as was said earlier, there was going to be a better detail of it later for us to get the measurements on a more accurate, that she stated. I would need to see that before a decision could be made on that.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion?
It might be a question for staff, but supposing modification to that cul-de-sac needs to be made in order to better allow for fire access, would that be made in the TRC, at the TRC level?
It's an existing cul-de-sac, so I would think if you're going to modify that within the right-of-way, it could be part of this project. I mean, it's an existing right-of-way that you're modifying. I don't know if that would be part of this project or not.
It's located outside of the project boundary, so I think we're limited as to what can be required for the improvement of an existing road.
It is adjacent to it though, right? I mean, the same as a turn lane?
Along the frontage, potentially, but anything beyond that, I think would be outside the bounds of what we have the authority to require.
All right. Well, I think that I find myself in a really sort of kind of this circular reference of, I think that we don't typically look and consider the use. I feel like we're looking at this from the perspective of, are the access points appropriate? Is the length of the private driveway appropriate? We don't make judgment on the use. So if that would be up to Planning Commission and Council as part of the rezoning to determine if this is an appropriate use for this area. I've always thought of our role as being more of, okay, if this use is proposed, then is this circulation, or these access points, or these driveway locations, is it appropriate? And I really don't, there's clearly a site constraint with, if the standard says that they've got, 500 feet from, for the parking area, I'm seeing a dimension on here of, I can't read that, but it's like 1,300 and some odd feet of the length of the property. I mean, it's clearly couldn't be met and make any use out of the back half of that property without an additional street. It would really be up to council as to whether that's the appropriate way to handle that. I mean, I feel like my opinion is, if this is what's going to be built, the driveways proposed are really about the best they can do. The one sort of question I had in looking at it, and it's sort of semi-relevant, and maybe it's a question for the applicant, is I see dumpster and compactor locations. I just wanted to confirm that the way those are located, those are not going to be utilizing 29th Street to enter and exit. Is that correct? Is there anyone who can answer that? I'm trying to just get a gauge for, the volume and type of traffic that may be sort of using 29th Street.
It would be a valet trash, and I can have, if you'd rather hear from the property owner, and we'd be happy if this board wanted to make a condition, if the city trash, 29th is a city road, I don't think they'd want to come up 29th Street and through the property. And again, we intend it to be a valet trash service, so if that needed to be a condition of the board, we would be happy to accept that.
Meaning, by valet trash, you mean not city trash?
And we would remove it from, yes. It would not be a city trash truck, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other discussion? We ready for a motion of any kind?
Mr. Chair, let me check with the parties one time.
Yep,
There was some
sure.
mention of a brief rebuttal. I just wanted to check with Mr. Shipman, Ms. Schaefer.
Yep,
Ms. Shipman declined. Ms. Schaefer, did you wish to rebut briefly? And Mr. Shipman, I'll open it back up to you again if you so desire.
Not a rebuttal per se, but just to say that we do believe that we've met the prima facie case. I think the staff report, Ms. Engelbrenson's report, as well as her testimony show that we've met the prima facie case, and that the only evidence that you heard in contrary to the 500, 800-foot rule waiver request was that if we could access the city property. And well, that's not within our control. So based on the site constraints that we have, this is the plan that we're presenting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the ambiguity that you have pointed out that exists within that portion of the ordinance that calls for an applicant to seek this variance. But I didn't write it, and you didn't either. And the burden is on them to show that this design adjustment conforms with the adopted comprehensive plan. It's incumbent upon them to show that this design adjustment does not increase traffic congestion and does not compromise safety. That's part of this process. The next process is a legislative process because it's a rezoning, meaning that they can make a decision for any reason, right? You can have ex parte communications on a legislative decision. We've already have with members of City Council. But at this stage, we believe the ordinance is clear about what they have to present. And we can't make any assumptions at this stage. Is this the proverbial cart before the horse? I don't know. I think it is, given the burden that is placed upon the applicant to prove to you that this conforms with the LDC and the comprehensive plan, not just the request for a variance. This does, and we don't think it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the board? Do I hear any kind of motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the waiver request for the private driveway length exceeding 500 linear feet. Part of our, with the rationale being due to site constraints, I don't see it being possible to achieve compliance with the technical standards based on the site conditions. And it seems to me this is a reasonable effort to comply and bring circulation where none currently exists.
Are there any conditions that you would like to add to that?
Feel free.
Well, I guess I would only clarify that there was a recommended condition in the staff report that the Wayne Drive, the Wayne Drive driveway be, where did it, I just had it, sorry. Oh, an additional vehicular driveway connection shall be required on Wayne Drive. The site plan in front of us shows a vehicular connection on Wayne Drive, and the applicant has indicated that they were planning to propose, so I don't really feel like that's necessary. And the fact that it's, I guess, conditional upon, the rezoning goes without saying. I mean, that's inherent to the request. So, nothing else. I'm gonna second that motion. Any other discussion? All right, so we vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Because going around the outside.
Chairman Gordon, can you take just a 5-minute recess
Yes.
before we take this next
Yes.
item?
Yes, I will make a
Just give
5-minute
us,
recess.
just give us 1 or 2 minutes.
Yep,
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Where's Rich? Okay. We'll bring the meeting back into order. Item number 3, 216 Gray Street. Staff?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The site is located on the south side of Gray Street between 2nd and 3rd. It includes approximately 1.1 acres. It's currently zoned CBD Central Business District. Includes one structure. It's the former Register of Deeds office, New Hanover County offices. There's also some off-street parking and some other public amenities located on site. This applicant has submitted construction plans for review to redevelop the site with a new public library and museum. The plan does include one new driveway on North 2nd Street to be used for a service entrance and deliveries. The technical standards specify a minimum driveway offset from the property line of 6.5 feet. The applicant proposes an offset less than 6.5 feet, and an adjustment is required. The Land Development Code also specifies that one primary building entrance be provided along street fronting facades at a rate of one entrance per 100 feet. The applicant proposes building entrances at a rate of less than 1 per 100 feet, and an adjustment is required. The justification for these adjustments are concluded in Table 1 of the staff report and also included in their adjustment request letter, which is Attachment 3. That is the conclusion of staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is available for questions as well.
Thanks, Brian. I do have one question. The two variances, the first one, or actually the second one, is the minimum number of primary building entrances along a street-facing facade. That's not a variance that we see very often. I was wondering if you could explain the sort of logic behind that and the intent.
This would be something new. The SRB would not have seen this. This is new for the Design Adjustment Committee. It is strictly a design adjustment based on the building design standards of the Central Business District. So it is different. There are a different set of criteria in the ordinance, which are also included in the report, of things you need to consider when you consider that adjustment. It is strictly an adjustment based on the design of the structure itself, not a technical standard for how the site complies with our manual or any improvements within the right-of-way.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Balland, professional engineer with Paramount Engineering, and I'm the civil engineer for this project. I also have with me Mr. Charles Boney of LS3P, who's the project architect of this project also. I was going to start by speaking on the first item with the 6.5-foot offset, since that's more technical. I'll let Charles address the entrance per 100 feet. So, excuse me, what we're requesting is we have a service drive, as you'll see on 2nd Street, bottom left-hand side of your screen. That's where we are going to, have the access for deliveries and whatnot. Again, the two uses we're looking at is a museum and we're looking at a library. Both of them require cover access. They both require secured access. So with that being said, there are going to be books being handled. We don't want to obviously expose those to weather. There's museum presentations that'll come in that obviously some are probably very expensive and they want to be secured. So this is the location where all that's going to take place. The way that the building works and the way the functionality went, this was kind of the place we felt the best for this use, for the back of the house use, for the deliveries. We pulled away from Gray Street and 2nd intersection as far as we could. It's much further to Princess and 2nd intersection, so that's not an issue. So our overlap is really in our driveway apron. That's kind of what we're talking about. We have the parking garage next door to us, and on the parking garage, if you all are familiar with it, we probably walk by it every day, and if you could just go to your memory and get a photo of it, there's two really big wide openings that go into that. They're, for the in and the out, and they're probably the largest aprons I've ever seen. So, I don't know what the reason was behind that. I'm not going to speculate, but with that being said, really the two aprons are going to come together. They may overlap about a foot or two over each other, but, I think that's a detail we can work out. And then when doing that, we kind of looked at it and said, okay, how we see vehicles coming out of the parking garage. They're not going to be 18-wheelers. They're not going to be large box trucks. They don't fit. So we don't have that issue. So really we're dealing with mostly, passenger vehicles, SUVs, things of that nature that are coming out of that area. So that's kind of what we looked at in modeling. And really, like I said, the driveway opens are so wide. I don't know why they're that way. They just are. So really it's not needed. We don't see a conflict of anybody coming out there with that. So we've also, which I'll be happy to share with you in just a moment too, we have auto turn modeled. It's going to be a W50 is what we're being told is going to be the truck that will access this part here, because again, carrying large presentations, this is the worst case. This is the truck that will come in maybe every 3 months. Could be, it's kind of, just whenever they change out a museum piece. So this isn't your daily, everyday use. This is a very occasional use when they change something out. The daily use is going to be more of the, excuse me, like the New Hanover County box truck that'll go around to the libraries to collect books and distribute back to different places. It'll be the FedEx truck or the UPS truck that comes in, pulls under, gives their deliveries and leaves. So that's what we're looking at in this type of use here. So the worst case scenario for us is the W50, but the everyday traffic is going to be the box truck from the county library and the museum possibly, and the UPS and FedEx people. So that's the primary entrance here. And like I said, I've modeled the WB50 here to work. We don't come down, we don't encroach on their apron. I'll be happy to share that with you in just a moment. So that's really what I have to present here. I'm happy to listen to any other questions, but I'm going to grab my board and hold those up, and if I may,
Can I ask you, because I feel like I'm kind of splitting it up, and I wanted to get some questions on the driveway, and then we'll go to the other part. What is the proximity of this apron to the apron in the parking deck?
Are you talking about where they meet the curb, or?
Yes, at the curb. Do they overlap?
That's what I was saying. They overlap. Each of them, kind of the 2 points go to maybe like 2 feet or so, 2.5 feet, where they overlap on each other.
Does your auto turn show that you need that full taper width?
I do not, and that's why I did the auto turn, to show that we weren't accessing that full.
Can you reduce the taper width from what's shown on here, or is this the minimum that you can
Well, this
achieve?
is the city standard, commercial driveway up in the 13-foot offset. That's exactly what's shown. And that's where the conflict arises. We can model that like we did in auto turn and pull that apron back and not have that conflict point at all.
Okay. All right.
But it's still, the way I interpret the rule is the 6.5 feet off the property line. I mean, we don't.
And after, I know, I completely understand it, but I mean, it also kind of matters that New Hanover County is the owner of the
Correct.
Maybe it's the city. Who owns the one?
It's
New
the
Hanover
county,
Yeah. And is that deck going to remain after this is redeveloped?
It's my understanding.
So that's
it
not
will.
changing?
That's my understanding it will, correct.
Okay. And you say that you modeled it for the WB50. The WB50 does or does not extend out into the road or apron? How far does that 50?
Yeah, and the reason for that truck and the reason for the depth of the well is because it'll be all the way inside the well.
Oh,
so it
sweet.
won't block
Okay.
the sidewalk at all
Perfect.
either. So.
Perfect. Okay.
My question about that driveway was, WB50 is obviously going to need to back in. Will there be any vehicles that enter front ways and back out onto the roadway?
I mean, you can look at it there and see it. I mean, it's relatively a large opening. Will someone come in and try to do a K-turn on a van? Possibly. But that you brought that up, I mean, we have this on the Board of Adjustment agenda also, which was supposed to be tomorrow, but we've deferred because there are members short, and we want to get there with the full 5-member board. So the following month, we have to go to the Board of Adjustment for that movement, for that not forward motion movement.
Right. I guess what I was thinking, and maybe it's a TRC thing, but if that was a reverse in area only, and there was no flare toward the property line,
yeah,
you would attain the 6 foot, maybe. I'm just eyeballing. It's pretty close to 6.5 feet from the property line. But
it is close, and I think that's something else we can look at too. And if it got to a TRC level, was look at just how we can model that with a van and see really where it goes. Because I think even with a van, I mean, it's an 18-foot wide throat through there, so that gives us pretty good width to begin with. Where most vans can really just utilize the driveway and not so much the aprons to it. So, again, this is exactly city standard detail laid on there, and that's why we wanted to show it that way. But the models, I think, speak for themselves, so. You want me to grab those and pass them around to you?
No, it's okay. Any other questions for Rob? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Charles Boney, architect with LS3P Associates, and I have to say this building has been like designing a watch, putting things in exactly the right place, no larger, no smaller, and the location of the loading dock is really the best location we can find in order to make this building work. I'd reiterate everything that Rob has mentioned. It's been a very tight kind of thing to work out, and we hope you'll agree to that, to this change.
Were you able to speak to the other variants?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm happy
yeah.
to speak to that one as well. I wasn't sure whether you wanted to vote on one item
No,
at a
no,
time.
no. I was just going to ask Rob the technical questions related to auto turns, and then let you handle the architectural side.
I'm with you right now.
Okay.
I'm not an expert traffic engineer, certainly. I'll address the issue of the single entrance then. This building is a large municipal facility. It's a single building with shared by two occupants. It is the design of that, the location of the entry was predicated upon several things. One was the joint desire to have a single entrance, a single control point for the museum and for the library. Second one was to be able to have a place where we could corral children, sort of bring them into a central area outside where they're dropped off by the buses. And you see this notch that we have on the northeast corner there, immediately preceding the entrance coming into the building. We've created that space in order to provide this sort of forecourt for children coming in. Another issue for that has been certainly security, not only of the building itself, but also for the children coming in. This is primarily, in addition to adults, it's a child-oriented facility. School buses will be dropping kids off there. We want to be able to control them at one point in and one point out, and that helps us a great deal in our security matters. I would further say that this is not a precedent-setting change. This is something that's recognized within all the municipal buildings downtown. It's a single entrance to a municipal building, just as we have for the courthouse, just as we have for City Hall here, that entrance, Thallian Hall entrance on that side over there, and just as we have for the current public library. So we would, I'd urge your approval or acceptance of that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Boney?
I was just going to ask, so this library is replacing the current library?
That is correct, yes.
How many entrances does the current library have?
It has that single entrance on this corner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, Chad? Anything?
Actually, I misspoke. Sorry, there is an entrance coming in from the parking deck, if we call that an entrance, but the main area there for entry is on that corner.
Will there be an entrance off the parking deck to this building?
Not for the public.
Not for the public, okay.
That's correct. We are planning, we're looking at staff entrances on the second floor to facilitate some office operations there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion before we open the public hearing? I don't think there's any public here to speak, but I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Okay, so we have two waivers, and is there any discussion on those waivers?
I'll speak a little bit about the entrance requirements.
Thank you.
The intent of that is to help create a more walkable urban environment, to where we don't have, large blank walls in downtown, and would apply, I think, pretty well to most developments that we would see. I do agree with the statement just made that a lot of our civic buildings require, because of their programming, require a different approach. And I think that this is the path to consider that approach, right? You know, courthouse is a great example of a building, a use that probably literally couldn't achieve and still maintain like a functioning safety protocols for their building and points of access. With all that said, I think this is a large civic building, and what they're proposing here, I think, does a good job of mediating the two. At least in my mind, you know, they've pulled back the corner a little bit. They've made this plaza area, and which will serve to pull, like if you're, whether you're walking or the bus drops you off or you're walking in from the sidewalks, it's going to pull you into that area. And so it's kind of mediating that entrance for you rather than just simply having doors over here and doors over here. So I think this would be, the intent of that is, of the regulation is really good. This is a place to, I think, consider something a little bit different.
Okay.
Do you have any concerns with the existing library only having one main public entrance?
No, actually, it's quite desirable.
I'm just trying to compare the two. Like, if that's what we have now and it's not a problem, then, yeah.
I mean, just rolling through all the libraries I've been through in my career, but some of them have two entrances. It requires another, you know, whether, I don't know what the security devices that we have here, if there's, you know, things that read if you've taken the book out or something like this, but it requires a much more kind of daunting level of security for a busy public building like this. So.
Okay. Okay, well, there are two waivers. The first one listed on here is the driveway offset. The second one is the entrance issue. Am I correct in assuming there is no preliminary plan, so this would be you know, just a considering of the variances and no additional approval?
That is correct.
Okay, and there are no staff recommended conditions associated with any of these variances?
No, sir.
Thank you. I guess I'll start off with the driveway thing. I mean, those seem like pretty wide flares. I feel like if we do vote to approve this, I mean, I would want the TRC to have the flexibility to reduce those flares to whatever is necessary for the design vehicle. In other words, I don't want to make them overly wide and overlapping a previous driveway entrance just for the sake of meeting a technical standard. I know that there's discussion in the, you know, in the revision of the technical standards that having different, you know, apron widths downtown versus out in the suburban areas. So I feel like this is a case where we might have an opportunity to add a condition to reduce those flares, which would, you know, lessen the impact of the variance and, you know, to whatever is the minimum. Any thoughts on that? Okay, I'll make that a motion. On the first variance, which is the driveway offset from the property line, I'm going to make a motion that we approve due to site constraints and with the added condition that the TRC has the ability to reduce the flare width to what is necessary to accommodate the movement of the design vehicle. And I'm assuming that will be in the reverse motion subject to BOA approval, as I'm hearing, so.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So that's the first variance. And the second variance regarding the number of driveways, is there any further discussion on that? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance request number 2 for primary building entrances for minimum rate of 1 entrance per 100 feet.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I should have stopped a minute ago, but I don't recall having a public comment period. Did we?
Yeah.
Great.
I opened it.
I apologize,
yeah,
I missed
yeah.
it.
I think I did.
Just making sure.
Yep, nope, you're fine. It happened quickly.
With, the motion is to approve the variance request number 2, with the rationale that uses of buildings sometimes require a more nimble approach, and that may not be perfectly in line with some of the tech standards or regulations that we have. And the consideration of the use here, the public building, and the need to be able to control access is the rationale for it.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. If there's no other items, meeting's adjourned.